In the early hours of this morning, President Trump announced to US Congress Ukraine is on the brink of signing that minerals and security deal in a bid to secure peace.
It comes, of course, after the dramatic row between the two presidents in the Oval Office last Friday, which resulted in Donald Trump then suspending all military support from the US to Ukraine.
But after a whirlwind of politics and diplomacy, should the UK be focusing on domestic priorities instead of loaning Ukraine billions of pounds to boost defences? Former Defence Secretary Penny Mordaunt says we need to protect the nation and defend our interests, even if that means that spending more on defence means making cuts to, for instance, the welfare budget. Former Director of Communications for Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider, says there's no evidence military spending will have a positive economic effect or make us any safer. So good morning to you both. James Schneider, there is generally, we've seen from the polling, generally, Keir Starmer's playing a blinder, diplomatically he's doing really well. This boost in defence is generally popular. But what we're getting from viewers every morning is, I'm a carer, I can't pay my bills. I've lost my winter fuel allowance, I'm a pensioner, I'm struggling with childcare or whatever. What sense do you get about the potential domestic cuts which are going to pay for this?
Well, I think your viewers are quite right. Money can always be found for war and weapons. And when we're told that there's no money for things which are going to make life easier for us and our families and our communities. And I was reading this morning that the Treasury is preparing another round of cuts. They're looking at £10 billion worth of cuts in the upcoming spending review.
Cuts to?
They haven't said exactly what they're going to be, but you know what the cuts are going to be. They're going to be cuts that are for the services and the entitlements that ordinary people rely on or that their families rely on. And I think it shows completely the wrong priorities. I think when living standards are so squeezed in this country, when energy bills are going up, council taxes going up, cost of food is going up way above wages, these are the things which should be the priority of the government.
So, Penny, John on X, I'm fed up with Starmer throwing our money at him, that's Zelensky. This war was never going to end any differently, despite Starmer's interfering, which is counterproductive and costs this country billions, which we haven't got, cuts for everyone for a generation. As a former Defence Secretary, what do you say to John and our viewers who say, why is it our job to give all these billions to Ukraine?
Look, spending money on defence is spending money on domestic priorities. Our armed forces do a tremendous job every day, and because they do, you don't notice what they do. 90% of everything you're going to use today has come to this country by sea. We import 50% of our food. 97% of the data we use is transmitted on undersea cables that are under attack every day from Russia. So if you don't spend money on defence and protecting those things, you will very quickly feel it in how much you're paying for food, how much you're paying for fuel. It's not an either-or. The reason why this is described as the first duty of government is because unless you can protect this country, the people in it, and our interests, then everything else is for the birds.
James, we know that when Russia invaded Ukraine, our energy prices went through the roof. So Penny's got a point, hasn't she? If we can defend Ukraine, we can actually bring the bills down. Well, I mean, there is a direct correlation with domestic issues and the cost of living.
Of course, there's a big relationship between global security and what happens domestically. And we very rarely see, when people are talking about increasing defence spending, things which are actually going to make us more secure at home, including for our energy security. If you want energy security, we should have a big expansion of wind, for example, off the coast of Scotland. So it's not just a question of if you spend money, it will make us more secure. Let's look at the track record of British military policy over the last 35 years. You know, we invaded Afghanistan, the Taliban are back in charge. We invaded Iraq, that created ISIS, made us less safe at home. We backed the overthrow of Gaddafi, causing wreckage to the whole region. We spend tens of billions of pounds on Trident. The missiles are not even ours. We have to lease them from the US.
And there
hasn't been a successful test launch in over a decade. So
but we're about to celebrate, after 80 years, VE Day with parties' processions, because 80 years ago, we, with our partners, fought off a fascist threat to the East through our military power. I mean, isn't that something to learn from? Well,
my point is this blank cheque that we are writing, 2% to 2.5% to 2.6% to 3% of GDP, this blank cheque, is it going to make us any safer? Did Afghanistan and Iraq, for example, make us any safer?
But I'm asking about Germany. I'm asking about Germany in the Second World War and a threat in Europe to our east. Is that so different from the threat to our east from Putin today?
I do think that Nazi Germany and contemporary Russia are really rather different.
Right.
I mean,
so defend Putin then.
No, I'm sorry. Just because you don't think that someone is the same as Hitler doesn't mean that they should be defended. Vladimir Putin is a reaction.
Has invaded another country, and he's a dictator.
Vladimir Putin is a very nasty, reactionary, conservative leader who's been in power for 25 years, who invaded another country. Okay. That should be opposed, absolutely. So, for example, I think that where Britain does put money into Ukraine, it should be on securing the peace deal. So I wouldn't want us to send arms which could be used to extend that war, but I do think a commitment to peacekeepers is a very sensible thing.
So you would have British boots on the ground in Ukraine?
As peacekeepers, as part of a peace agreement.
Good.
Penny Mordaunt.
So, look, when we go to war, as Ed will testify, the money to fund that comes out of Treasury contingency. What we're talking about is the defence budget, the core defence budget. And the reason why you spend money on that is not because we want more war. It's because unless you can demonstrate your ability to respond to aggression, you have no deterrent. I mean, Ed mentioned the nuclear deterrent earlier. For decades, that has kept us safe. Because we haven't fired it doesn't mean we're not using it every single day. And I would just say to James, I'll try and pick a subject you care about. In Gaza, who do you think it was that delivered thousands of tons of aid and shelter kits into Gaza? Was it Amazon or the Avon lady? No, it wasn't. It was the RAF, the Royal Fleet Auxiliary, and the Royal Logistic Corps.
The RAF has also flown more surveillance flights over Gaza so that Israel can obliterate it than even the Israeli Air Force or the US.
I do want to. I appreciate this is I do appreciate Gaza is a very important issue, Penny. Sorry, I just want to focus on Ukraine just right now. James also mentioned that our track record in Iraq and Afghanistan has not been great. Do you think that has made us safer or less safe?
So, look, I would argue that a lot of things that we have done have made us safer. We have to tackle these threats wherever they arise. We are focused on Ukraine, very understandably, but there are things going on in the Mediterranean, in the Middle East at the moment, which can be a direct threat to the UK. We have a lot of tasks to cover off. And part of the reason why we've got problems in those areas, Afghanistan, for example, is because of decisions that the US has taken. We are in a different world now. We've got to recognise that, particularly in our own neighbourhood in Europe, we have got to do more to protect ourselves. The Americans will be with us, but only if we take a greater share of the burden.
And he's paying for that by cutting the UK aid budget, our development budget, as Keir Starmer's done. Is that the right decision?
So I think we should be making cuts across a number of budgets. As someone that has been an advocate for good aid spending, I can justify those cuts to the aid budget if it is spent on defence capabilities. What is not a good idea, Ed, is taking that money from the Foreign Office, giving it to the MOD, only to pay the Foreign Office bills on the Chagos Islands. That's nuts.
Penny Mordaunt and James Schneider, thank you.
Thank you.
Very much indeed.